"What did you say? Why doesn't anyone here understand me?" James Lee thundered, his voice reverberating through the hotel lobby and drawing every eye toward him. "Sir, if you can't speak English, you should have brought an interpreter. This is the Regal Hotel, not a flea market." Robert Eaton, the hotel manager, replied icily, deliberately enunciating each word with disdain, his gaze cold as ice. In the crowd, wealthy guests began whispering with thinly veiled mockery, "Maybe he just stepped off his private jet but still hasn't bothered to learn English. All the money in the world, yet no manners to speak of." Those cruel, careless remarks cut into James Lee's pride like invisible blades. Standing amidst Manhattan's most opulent lobby, with its glittering crystal chandeliers and glossy marble floors, he felt colder and more isolated than ever before. It was the first time he'd ever experienced such blatant discrimination in a place famed for its elegance and refinement. A powerful Chinese-American billionaire, someone who would normally command unwavering respect, was now met with nothing but contempt and indifference beyond anything he could have imagined. Not far away, Tiana Jackson, a black maid who spent her days quietly cleaning and observing, witnessed the entire scene. Her heart clenched, and she subconsciously gripped her broom tighter as James continued pleading in Mandarin, "I have a reservation. Why won't anyone check it?" Eaton merely curled his lips into a smug smile and signaled to the front desk staff to ignore James's plea. "Tell him to wait. I don't have time for people who don't know how to behave." Tiana bit her lip as outrage surged within her. She understood every word James was saying. She knew exactly what he was going through, but between them lay an invisible barrier, a divide born of roles, status, and skin color. Her eyes drifted to the vintage, high-end suitcase James had brought with him, a piece of luggage concealing his family's most precious secret. In that moment, a question flickered through Tiana's mind. Was this the time to break her silence and help a complete stranger? On the polished marble floor lay a jade phoenix necklace, its gentle green glow radiating quiet authority amid the tension filling the Regal Hotel. No one noticed the priceless treasure except Tiana. Her gaze locked on the exquisitely crafted pendant, her heart pounding with anxious anticipation. She wanted to move forward, but her legs felt paralyzed. Tiana knew all too well that any action now could endanger her with Manager Eaton, the same man whose power she had often seen make life unbearable for staff like her. At that very moment, from a distant corner of the grand foyer, Eaton leaned toward an employee and spoke in a low, mocking tone. "It's such a nuisance dealing with people like him. Don't rush to resolve his request. Let him stew a while so he learns some humility." Though his words were barely more than a whisper, Tiana heard every syllable. A chill of foreboding slithered into her chest, a warning that this ordeal was far from over. While Tiana still hesitated, soft murmurs began to ripple through the circle of upscale guests around the grand lobby. A middle-aged blonde woman in a Chanel dress leaned toward her friend and whispered just loud enough for nearby listeners to catch, "These people always act so important, yet they don't even know how to behave in a place like this. Money sure can't buy you courtesy." Light laughter followed, quiet but sharp enough to wound. The other wealthy patrons swiftly turned their mocking gazes on James Lee, no longer bothering to disguise their contempt. James likely did not understand their words, but their gestures, glances, and smirks spoke volumes. He straightened, forcing himself to project the confidence of a powerful billionaire, yet the alienating chill in the air steadily eroded his composure. A few steps away, Robert Eaton reveled in the uncomfortable spectacle. Arms crossed and face an icy mask of satisfaction, he watched the troublesome guest finally realize his disadvantage. At over 60 years old, Eaton's tall frame and cold blue eyes lent him an imposing presence. In his more than 2 decades at the Regal, he had built a rock-solid reputation for polished professionalism and gracious service to the elite. Beneath that perfect veneer, however, lurked simmering prejudice. A man who masked deep-seated bias behind a facade of genteel smiles. Eaton approached James once more, deliberately speaking each word in a slow, patronizing tone that implied Mr. Lee was uncultured. "Mr. Lee, as I've already explained, your room won't be ready until tomorrow. Perhaps you'd prefer a hotel more suitable to your circumstances." James's brow furrowed as he caught the clear provocation in Eaton's words. In a voice more firm and defiant than he'd ever dared before, he spoke English for the first time, halting but resonant with authority. "I booked a room for today. I am not going anywhere." For a moment, Eaton's smile froze, but he quickly regained his composed, courteous facade. His eyes, however, remained as cold as ice as he replied softly, "I understand there's been some misunderstanding, Mr. Lee. But as you can see, we can't simply alter reservations on a whim. This is the Regal Hotel, not a roadside inn." That final remark struck James's pride like an invisible blade. The hushed whispers swelled again, this time louder and more unmistakable. Those scrutinizing, judgmental stares felt like a barrage of needles. James inhaled deeply, fighting to stay calm, but his hands clenched into tight fists at his sides. Tiana stood frozen, her heart racing faster than ever. She had worked at the hotel long enough to know that Eaton's discrimination went beyond class. Beneath his polite exterior lay deep racial bias. She'd watched colleagues of color and immigrant staff endure his subtle but cruel mistreatment, and none had dared speak up for fear of losing their jobs or being ostracized. But witnessing this scene ignited a painful recognition in her. She, too, knew the gut-wrenching feeling of being devalued because of one's background, skin, or language. As Eaton turned to leave, he paused, his gaze falling on Tiana, still standing at the edge of the lobby. He shot her a suspicious look and barked out with authority, "Tiana, why are you standing there? This isn't a place for you to loaf around. Get back to work." The guests nearby turned to stare at Tiana as if she were an oddity amid the opulence. Embarrassed and frightened, she bowed her head and attempted to slip away. But as she turned, her eyes met James's. Gone was the anger she'd seen before. In its place, exhaustion and despair mixed with a silent plea for help. His look reached into her, and in that instant, Tiana felt a small, fierce spark ignite within her chest. She realized that her silence carried too high a price. If she continued to stay quiet, James Lee would suffer injustice. The truth would remain buried, and, most devastatingly, she would never forgive herself. With her decision made, Tiana bent down and scooped up the jade phoenix necklace from the marble floor, gripping the meaningful symbol tightly in her hand. A surge of courage rose from deep within her heart, compelling her to step forward toward the Chinese-American billionaire. She drew in a steadying breath, summoned every ounce of bravery, and walked toward James Lee, one small action that would change her life, his life, and the future of the Regal Hotel, forever. Tiana's heart pounded as she took those small, determined steps toward James Lee, the mocking whispers, the suspicious glances, and, most chilling of all, Eaton's icy stare made each footstep feel like walking a taut, fragile wire on the verge of snapping. Yet for the first time in her life, she no longer wanted to hide the special gift she'd kept buried deep in her heart. She stopped in front of James Lee and gently opened her palm. There lay the jade phoenix necklace, vibrant green and priceless, gleaming beneath the Regal Hotel's grand chandeliers. Her voice rose soft and clear, each Mandarin word rolling out like a melodious tune in the hushed lobby. "Excuse me, sir. This is your necklace, isn't it?" The room fell into stunned silence. All eyes shifted to Tiana, curious guests, slack-jawed staff, and especially Eaton. James's expression melted from surprise into deep emotion. His eyes widened in disbelief as if he couldn't believe someone here spoke his mother tongue with native fluency. You speak Chinese?" James Lee asked, voice trembling with hope and astonishment. Tiana offered a respectful nod, replying in flawless Mandarin, "Yes, I lived in Beijing for 2 years as a child. I know how difficult it must be to be unable to communicate in a foreign land. May I help you?" James took the necklace, his hand shaking with gratitude. He looked at Tiana as though she were a lone beacon in a dark room. For a moment he was speechless, then his tone softened with genuine thankfulness. "Thank you. Truly, thank you. I never expected to meet someone here who could understand me like you do." Their tender moment shattered with the sound of heavy footsteps. Eaton strode over, lowering his voice to a warning growl. "Tiana, I don't recall asking you to meddle in a guest's affairs. What is your job again? Surely you remember." Eaton's eyes, sharp as daggers, betrayed his anger and threat as he glared at Tiana. To him, her intervention was betrayal, a breach of the unspoken barrier he'd long enforced between staff and powerful guests. Tiana bowed her head, forcing calm into her tone. "I'm sorry, Mr. Eaton, but this guest was in distress, and I only wanted to help him understand what was happening." Eaton sneered. His polished exterior couldn't fully hide the resentment bubbling beneath. "Ms. Jackson, this hotel has strict standards for guest services. We don't employ housekeeping staff as interpreters. If Mr. Lee truly needs assistance, I will call in a professional, not a cleaning attendant." James, though not fluent, caught the insult in Eaton's tone and words. His face flushed with anger and resolve, the same steely authority that had racked up billions in deals. "This young woman just helped me make sense of what's been happening here, Mr. Eaton. I trust her more than anyone else in this hotel." Eaton froze, realizing he had grossly underestimated James Lee's influence, but his arrogance and prejudice wouldn't let him yield. He gave a cold laugh. "I'm sorry, Mr. Lee, but I cannot allow a housekeeper to handle professional matters. I hope you'll understand." James said nothing, only shook his head in disappointment. A billionaire accustomed to being underestimated for his Asian heritage had felt many slights, but never one so painful, right in a place celebrated for its elegance and hospitality. Tiana stepped back, shame and helplessness flooding her. She knew Eaton would never forgive her for this. Just as she turned to leave, a firm voice rang out behind her. "Wait, young lady." Tiana spun around. James looked at her with unwavering determination. "I want you to be my personal interpreter during my stay here. I will pay you what you deserve. Don't refuse me." Eaton's eyes widened. For the first time in his career, his authority felt genuinely threatened. His gaze darted between James and Tiana, sharp as a knife trying to pierce their intent. In that instant, he realized that Tiana, a mere cleaner he'd always assumed would obey without question, had become a power no less capable of upending everything he'd built. Tiana met Eaton's hateful, enraged glare and knew there was no turning back. She drew a deep breath and nodded to James Lee in perfect Mandarin. "Yes, Mr. Lee, I would be honored to assist you." In that moment, Eaton knew the real battle, between him and the housekeeper he once looked down upon, had only just begun. As soon as Tiana nodded her agreement to James Lee, she felt Eaton's gaze, sharp as a blade, pierce through her defenses, forcing her to confront a hard truth. From this moment on, her relationship with the powerful manager would never be the same. But James Lee didn't let her dwell in that tension for long. He immediately motioned for her to join him in a more secluded corner of the lobby. He studied her intently, his eyes shining with sincerity and gratitude. Then, in gentle Mandarin and with genuine concern, he asked, "I still can't believe it. You speak Chinese so fluently, as if you were born and raised in China. Can you tell me how an American like you can do this?" Tiana smiled softly, feeling the walls of caution around her begin to crumble. She took a deep breath and decided to share the little-known chapter of her past. "My mother is Elaine Jackson. She served as a cultural attaché in Beijing for about 2 years. I was just a child then, around 12 years old. At first, I really didn't want to leave my homeland for a completely foreign country. But my mother always said, 'Language is the bridge between cultures. You must open your heart to learn from and understand others.' She encouraged me to learn Mandarin, make friends with locals, and live as if I were part of that community." James Lee listened to every word, his expression shifting from surprise to deep understanding. His eyes reflected unwavering trust in the young woman seated before him. His tone softened with respect as he replied, "Your mother was truly visionary. Not everyone embraces that truth. I consider myself incredibly fortunate to have met you today, Tiana." He paused briefly, then continued with absolute seriousness and sincerity. "I know this might get you into trouble, but I truly need a reliable interpreter and assistant here at the hotel. I will ensure you're compensated fairly for your skill and the courage you showed today. Would you agree to be my personal assistant during my stay?" Tiana met James's earnest gaze, deeply moved by his kindness. Yet Eaton's warning glare still echoed in her mind. She knew he wouldn't let this go easily. Still, Tiana refused to live in fear and silence any longer. She straightened her back, looked James in the eye, and nodded firmly. "I accept, Mr. Lee. I will do everything I can to help you." At that very moment, a familiar figure appeared at the far end of the corridor. Eaton, clutching a stack of files, stood watching them with a threateningly sharp gaze. His face was flushed, every line hardened by cold determination. To him, Tiana's action wasn't merely helping a guest. It was outright betrayal of the hotel and his authority. Eaton spun on his heel and stormed off toward his private office. Inside the dimly lit room, the desk lamp cast shadows across his harsh, calculating expression. He booted up his computer and flipped through employee records, his cold eyes settling on the name Tiana Jackson. In her 2 years at the hotel, Eaton had never really noticed her, just another lowly staff member in his eyes. But now, that very invisibility had become a threat he could no longer ignore. He studied her file and discovered she'd lived in China for 2 years. Her mother, a respected diplomat. His eyes narrowed as his mind began to plot how to eliminate this new threat before things spiraled out of control. He knew he couldn't simply fire Tiana, especially now that she had the protection of a powerful guest like James Lee. Instead, he decided to apply subtle pressure, creating obstacles until she either quit or made a mistake serious enough to get her fired without any protector. He picked up the internal phone and called Human Resources in a calm but commanding voice. "Please send me the detailed work and disciplinary records for Tiana Jackson immediately. I want to review her performance and conduct thoroughly." Meanwhile, in the Regal Hotel's grand lobby, James Lee and Tiana continued speaking softly in the language few around them understood. James told Tiana more about why he'd come, about an important meeting scheduled for the next day, and the troubles he'd already encountered at the hotel. The more she listened, the more Tiana realized her role was even more vital than she'd imagined. Behind those antique trunks lay something far more complex that James couldn't yet reveal. But there was no time to think further, as Eaton's mounting tension hung heavily in the air. Tiana knew she'd stepped into a battle she never expected to fight. Yet for the first time in her life, she felt she was exactly where she belonged, doing exactly what she was meant to do, and that gave her a strength she'd never known before. In her heart, she vowed to face whatever consequences Eaton's wrath might bring, because from this moment on, her hidden gift would no longer be something to conceal, but her strongest weapon against the injustice lurking in the shadows of the Regal Hotel. The crystal chandelier's pale light in the Regal Hotel gradually shifted to a soft golden hue as dusk fell. In a secluded corner of the private tea salon, James Lee and Tiana were engrossed in conversation, unaware that a tall figure lurked just beyond the slightly ajar door at the far end of the hallway. It was Robert Eaton. His eyes, cold as steel, tracked their every small gesture. From his hidden vantage point, Eaton began to overhear a story he never imagined would resurface in his lifetime, one powerful enough to destroy everything he had painstakingly built over the years. Meanwhile, Tiana took a gentle sip of green tea, her gaze tender as she looked at the Chinese-American billionaire across from her. She realized that beneath James Lee's aura of power and confidence lay a weighty sorrow he had yet to share. Slowly, James set his teacup down, his deep eyes reflecting the dim glow of the table lamp. He spoke in Mandarin, his tone measured, somber, yet resolute. "Tiana, you may be wondering why I've insisted on staying at the Regal Hotel, despite the obstacles and lack of respect I've encountered here." Tiana nodded softly, her expression showing genuine concern and a willingness to listen. James continued, his gaze drifting to some distant point, as if peering through time into the past. "This hotel was originally built on land that belonged to my grandmother's family. Her name was Mei Lin, a brilliant, strong woman who owned an entire bustling block in central Manhattan during the 1940s. But everything changed in the early 1950s when the ancestors of the current manager, George Eaton, and a few unscrupulous partners swindled and seized all of that property." Tiana listened, stunned, each of James's words fitting together like crucial pieces of a puzzle that explained his presence here. He paused for a moment, looking down at the jade phoenix necklace he held tightly in his hand. His voice softened, heavy with emotion. "My grandmother died in bitterness and helplessness. She would tell my mother about this land and the ruthless betrayal by people she once trusted. She always believed that one day our family would reclaim what was taken. Before she passed, she gave this necklace to my mother with one final charge: return here to restore our family's honor and justice." Tiana felt her heart tighten at the heartbreaking injustice at the center of James's family history. She understood that the man before her was not merely pursuing a material inheritance. He was fighting to revive the dignity of a lineage long buried by injustice and neglect. Behind the door, Eaton clenched his fists, his face flushed with a mix of anger and fear. He had never imagined that, more than half a century later, the dark past his family had so carefully hidden would erupt so unexpectedly. Every word James spoke was like a dagger to the reputation Eaton had spent years forging. Worse still, Eaton recognized that James was not only a wealthy billionaire but also powerful and astute enough to uncover all the secrets he'd tried to bury. Eaton hurried back to his private office. Once inside, he slumped into his leather chair, breathing hard, his mind swirling with dark, chaotic thoughts. He muttered venomously, "Impossible. My family worked too hard to build this empire. I'll never let an Asian American billionaire and that lowly maid destroy everything." His fury and desperation crystallized into a cold, calculated plan. He knew that to protect his reputation and legacy, he had to eliminate the threat posed by James Lee and Tiana Jackson, by any means necessary. Meanwhile, in the tea room's corner, James looked Tiana in the eyes, his voice firm with determination. "Tiana, I know this is a great ask, but I need a trusted ally to help me prove the truth. This phoenix necklace is the most crucial piece of evidence. It's not just jewelry, it's the key to reversing decades of buried injustice." Tiana clenched her hand, her gaze more resolute than ever before. She felt more clearly than ever that her life had turned a new page, one she would never regret writing. "Mr. Lee, you can trust me completely. I will do everything in my power to help you restore justice for your family." James smiled, relief washing over him at the knowledge that he was no longer alone in this fight. In the cold room at the end of the hallway, Eaton began laying out the first steps of his insidious plan. He picked up the phone, his tone calm but laced with unspoken menace. "I want surveillance on every move James Lee and that employee Tiana Jackson make. Don't let a single detail slip through. If necessary, prepare to take action. I must ensure those two have no chance to destroy what belongs to my family." He set down the phone, his gaze icy as it swept the darkened windows overlooking the Regal Hotel. Inside his mind, an uncompromising battle had officially begun, and he was prepared to do whatever it took to defend the power, prestige, and legacy he considered his own. Night had long since fallen, and the Regal Hotel lay enveloped in an unsettling hush. After revealing the heartbreaking secret of his family's past, James Lee felt a weight lift from his shoulders, but he also knew that they were about to enter a perilous, high-stakes battle. For Tiana, the spark of faith and courage newly ignited within her had become an invisible source of strength, steeling her resolve as never before. Meanwhile, Eaton continued to monitor their every move in secret. Each step they took and every word they exchanged was reported back to him by trusted operatives he had quietly hired. Eaton understood all too well that to preserve the legacy his family had stolen, he could afford no mistakes. That evening, guided by intuition and the scattered memories of his grandmother's story, James invited Tiana to help him search for clues inside the Regal. He remembered his grandmother, May Lynn, speaking of a hidden Phoenix Wing, a private chamber secretly designed and built on this very grounds when the family still owned the land. They moved quietly down the long, deserted corridors. Tiana stopped before a wall adorned with classic ornamental molding in a dim corner of the hotel. Her heart leapt when she noticed a tiny phoenix emblem carved so subtly it was almost invisible. James hurried over, his breath catching with hope as he recognized the symbol. This was the secret sign his grandmother had described. He pressed his jade necklace against the carving. A clear click echoed, and a concealed door slowly swung open. Inside the dimly lit chamber, James and Tiana gasped at the vast, perfectly preserved space. The walls were covered in ancient patterned wallpaper, and large wooden cabinets brimmed with neatly organized books and files untouched for decades. At the room's center stood a glossy black ebony desk, dusted by time but still exuding grandeur. James approached the desk with reverent care, gently pulled open a drawer, and felt his heart stop when he discovered a large envelope sealed with classic red wax. Hands trembling, he opened the letter and read the crisp English handwriting. "To Mrs. May Lynn, I, George Eaton, hereby confess all the sins and wrongdoings I have committed against you and your family. Through deceit and coercion, I unfairly seized your land, exploiting your difficult circumstances and your trust. I know this truth can never undo the harm you suffered, but I hope this letter will one day help your family reclaim justice. James stood in stunned silence, each word in that letter cutting straight to his heart. This was the proof he had searched for all these years, a confession from the very man who had betrayed his family. Tiana hurried beside him, eyes wide with awe at the letter. Yet the letter was only the beginning. Around them lay priceless artifacts, ancient documents, land maps, and the original architectural blueprints of the hotel, all confirming that James's grandmother had indeed laid the foundation for the Regal, and that this Phoenix Wing preserved the most vital historical evidence. But as they absorbed their discovery, a shadowy figure lingered in the hallway, one of Eaton's covert agents, secretly recording everything with a miniature camera hidden in his sleeve. Minutes later, Eaton stared at his phone screen, breath heavy with rage. Clutching his phone, his eyes blazed with unprecedented fury and panic. Decades of secrets and schemes were now on the verge of exposure in a single instant. He stormed from his office and, voice icy, dialed the private security detail he used for his most clandestine operations. "You must act immediately. 2 people in the hotel are in possession of documents that cannot be allowed to go public. Recover every piece of evidence at any cost, and under no circumstances let them discover who's behind this." He hung up, his grip tight with wrath. He knew that if those documents reached the light of day, his family's empire and reputation would vanish like smoke. Yet he also knew James Lee and Tiana were no quitters. This fight had grown beyond personal vendettas. It was now a struggle between justice and corruption, between truth and the darkness of the past. Inside the secret Phoenix Wing, James and Tiana exchanged determined looks. They understood that once this door had opened, there was no turning back. But rather than fear, it only strengthened their resolve. James squeezed Tiana's hand, voice ringing with unwavering conviction. "Tiana, we have the truth. Now our mission is to protect it at all costs. No matter what happens, I will never back down." Tiana returned his grip, her eyes shining with steadfast resolve. "Mr. Lee, you can count on me. We will reclaim the justice that was stolen." In the shadow depths of the Phoenix Wing, 2 people from different worlds stood together on the same front line, ready to face the sinister plots Eaton had already set in motion behind the regal facade of the Regal Hotel. The Regal Hotel had never felt so stifled or unnerving under the cover of night. Tiana and James slipped out of the secret Phoenix Wing chamber in pensive silence. When their eyes met, they shared both hope and wariness of the dangers lurking around them. They fully understood that the files they'd uncovered weren't merely historical curiosities. They were the critical puzzle pieces capable of upending the fortunes and power of many, especially Robert Eaton. As they tried to calm their anxieties and plan their next move, Eaton, the man behind all their turmoil, had already begun to act decisively. The darkness of his greed and desperation had completely clouded his better judgment. He was determined to protect his family's stolen legacy at any cost, no matter how far he had to cross the line between right and wrong. That very night, while the hotel slept, 2 unfamiliar figures hired by Eaton crept quietly down the top-floor corridor where James Lee was staying. Under the faint hallway light, their professional, deliberate steps were clear. Within minutes, they picked James's lock with sophisticated tools, rifled through his luggage, and brazenly made off with every vital document. George Eaton's confession letter, the architectural plans, and all those priceless historical artifacts James had discovered. Then, as if they'd never been there, they vanished into the darkness in under 10 minutes. The next morning, James burst into Tiana's room in a fury of panic and disbelief. "Tiana, it's all gone. The files, the letter, everything. They ransacked my room overnight." Tiana raced to his suite, her eyes wide with concern at the chaos before her. She realized at once that Eaton had retaliated swiftly, and with alarming boldness. Just then, the door cracked open, and security guard Kevin Peterson, young and visibly tense, stepped inside. He glanced around warily before closing the door and hurrying to Tiana, face grave. "Tiana, there's something you need to know. I saw something I shouldn't have." Sensing Kevin's tension, Tiana nodded for him to continue, her heart pounding. "Last night, while reviewing the security footage, I saw Mr. Eaton meeting two strangers at the rear fire exit. They handed him a large file bag and something else I couldn't identify." Kevin hesitated, then pressed on, his voice steady and anxious. "Then Eaton and those two went straight up to Mr. Lee's floor. I saw it clearly, but Eaton ordered us to erase last night's footage." As James absorbed Kevin's revelation, rage and disappointment washed over his face. Tiana understood that this had become more than a dispute. It was now a fierce battle between justice and power, truth and lies. Turning to Kevin, Tiana spoke with gratitude and conviction. "Thank you for telling us, Kevin. You were braver than many here." Kevin nodded, though fear still lurked in his eyes. "I couldn't stay silent after what I saw, but now I'm worried Eaton will find out and I'll be in big trouble." Tiana squeezed Kevin's arm protectively, her tone firm. "You're not alone, Kevin. We'll protect you, but we need your help. See if you can restore that erased footage." Kevin, trembling yet resolute, replied, "I'll do everything I can. I don't want to aid any lies." Meanwhile, in his private office, Eaton sat clutching the stolen documents, a cruel satisfaction glinting in his eyes. He believed that with this evidence in hand, he could control the situation and snuff out the struggle James and Tiana had ignited. Yet Eaton didn't realize that his ruthless actions had only fanned the flames of determination within James and Tiana. They knew now this was no longer just a fight for family honor or personal justice. It was a war against a dark, dangerous power Eaton had long concealed. James moved to the window, gazing out at the city skyline with unwavering resolve. "Eaton thinks he can erase the truth by stealing our evidence. But he's wrong, Tiana. The truth always finds a way to be revealed. We will never give up." Tiana met his gaze and nodded with equal determination. "We'll get back what's ours, Mr. Lee. Eaton started this battle, but we will be the ones to finish it." In the tense hush that still hung over the Regal Hotel, Eaton had no inkling that his reckless cruelty had only made James and Tiana more determined and powerful than ever in their fight for justice. When the sun first peeked over the horizon, the Regal Hotel lay under a strange hush, as if its elegant calm hid something unsettling beneath. In the wake of the night's upheavals, a tense atmosphere crept through every corner. Eaton strode into the staff conference room with icy, hostile eyes and an air of absolute authority, like a predator poised for a decisive strike. "I want everyone here to listen carefully," Eaton began in a calm but steely tone, his gaze sweeping across the worried faces before him. "Due to actions that have seriously damaged the reputation of the Regal Hotel, I am terminating the contracts of the following individuals: Tiana Jackson, Kevin Peterson, and anyone found to have colluded with or supported Mr. James Lee." Each word landed like a freezing knife, sending a wave of panic through the ranks. Kevin sat rigid, his face ashen with shock. Tiana felt her heart pound with righteous anger. It was clear Eaton was issuing an all-out challenge, leaving no room for concealment. Without another word, Eaton turned on his heel and exited triumphantly, convinced that by eliminating these threats he would regain total control. But he didn't realize that this move only pushed Tiana and James into a more fierce battle, one where truth and justice were the only goals. There was no time to hesitate. Tiana's voice trembled but rang with resolve as she approached James. "We have to get out of here right now." Eaton's moved beyond mere warnings. James nodded, fully aware of the stakes. They hurried toward the main exit, but as soon as they stepped into the lobby, they sensed the hotel security converging on them from all sides. "Stop right there!" one guard shouted, his voice booming with authority. With no choice but to flee, Tiana and James dashed down the long corridor and burst out onto the bustling streets of New York. Their pursuers' footsteps thundered behind them, dark silhouettes in pursuit. They wove through crowded sidewalks, pushing past startled pedestrians and honking cars. Tiana's heart pounded, but she squeezed James's hand, determined not to let go during this breathless chase. A sleek black car roared to block their path, but James yanked Tiana into a narrow alleyway just in time. They sprinted past overflowing garbage bins, the guards' shouts echoing behind them. "Don't let them escape!" Bursting into a cramped street market, they knocked over stalls in their desperate flight, creating chaos in their wake. Finally, they slipped into a jam-packed subway station. The train's doors slid shut just as the guards reached the platform, leaving angry faces behind. Gasping for air as the train hurtled through the city's dark tunnels, Tiana turned to James, worry and determination in her eyes. "We need somewhere safe to lie low. My mother's place. Eaton would never think to look there." James agreed without hesitation. They deboarded at the next stop and made their way to the modest Harlem brownstone where Elaine Jackson, Tiana's mother, lived. It was a small, cozy home nestled among leafy trees, a stark contrast to the chaos they'd fled. Elaine opened the door, eyes wide with surprise at the sight of her daughter, disheveled and breathless. "Tiana, what happened?" Tiana collapsed into her mother's arms, pent-up fear and exhaustion pouring out. "Mom, we're in grave danger. I'll explain everything. But first, we need to be safe." Elaine ushered them inside and locked the door. In the snug living room, Tiana and James recounted every detail. Eaton's betrayal, the stolen family secret, the terrifying chase. Elaine listened, her wise eyes fixed on James. When they finished, she spoke firmly, conviction resonating in her voice. "James, my mother always said truth can only be hidden for so long. People can run from justice, but they can never erase what they've done. You two are not alone in this fight. This home will be your refuge until you reclaim the justice that was stolen from you." Back at the Regal Hotel's office, Eaton slammed his fist on the desk, fury and desperation in his voice as he learned of their escape. "You're all useless. I want them found immediately, even if I have to turn this entire city upside down." He strode to the window and stared down at the crowded streets below, bitterness and fear etched on his face. Eaton knew that as long as James and Tiana remained free, he'd never have peace. Safe inside the Harlem brownstone, James and Tiana exchanged a look of unwavering determination. Though they knew many challenges lay ahead, they refused to surrender to power and deceit. Their battle to reclaim justice had only just begun, and they were ready for whatever came next. In the safe little house of Elaine Jackson in Harlem, the late afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, casting everything in a warm, yet anxious, golden glow. Tiana and James had just survived a heart-pounding escape, and now they understood that their struggle was no longer just a personal fight. It had become a matter of justice, a sacred mission to restore honor and unveil truths long buried. Wasting no time, Tiana reached out to Amanda Chun. president of the Chinatown Historical Society. Sharp, intelligent, and decisive, Amanda was renowned in the community for her historical investigations into immigrant stories, especially those forgotten or deliberately concealed. When Amanda heard James and Tiana's story, she immediately agreed to meet them the next day at a discreet coffee shop on Mulberry Street. There she sat, calm but passionate, flanked by Sarah Winters, a young but tenacious journalist known for exposing powerful scandals in New York. Sarah had heard of Eaton's reputation for years, but never had the proof she needed. Amanda spoke first, meeting James's gaze with sincere resolve. "I've long heard rumors about you and your family, but I never imagined I'd meet Mei Lin's direct descendant. I'll do everything in my power to help you seek justice," Sarah added, her voice firm. "If we can uncover indisputable evidence, this won't be buried in silence. Eaton will answer for his crimes." Their words bolstered James and Tiana's spirits, affirming that they were not alone. Immediately, they plunged into a rigorous hunt for historical records, a grueling yet hopeful quest. Over the following days, under Amanda's guidance, they pored over thousands of pages at the New York Public Library, local archives, and small neighborhood museums. Piece by piece, the dark conspiracy of the Eaton family emerged in chilling detail. Old deeds, letters, and land sale records not only corroborated George Eaton's confession, but revealed a criminal network involving many powerful figures in mid-century New York. Eaton, however, was not idle. From his opulent office at the Regal Hotel, he watched every development with icy fury. Unable to endure the thought of his family's reputation and fortune crumbling, he resolved to take ever more ruthless measures. That night, as Tiana reorganized crucial documents, her phone buzzed incessantly. A stranger's voice whispered just loud enough to unnervingly chill her. "Tiana Jackson, I can't reveal my identity, but you must know this. Eaton's men are watching you closely, and he plans to destroy both your reputations and your lives. Be careful. He won't stop at anything." The call ended abruptly, leaving Tiana in a state of panic. She immediately alerted James and their allies. They understood that Eaton, cornered, would resort to any tactic to win. From that day on, they moved with extreme caution. Amanda and Sarah meticulously duplicated every record and stored copies in secret locations. James and Tiana altered their routes whenever they left the house, remaining on constant alert. One tense evening, Sarah met Tiana at a quiet East Manhattan bar. Her face was grave as she spoke. "Tiana, I've just learned Eaton didn't stop at surveillance. He's hired a notorious private investigation firm, experts in dirty tricks, capable of smearing anyone who opposes their client. They'll fabricate lies to paint you both as villains." Tiana felt each word like a cold knife. Realizing this fight was no longer just about history or justice, it was about their very lives and reputations. "What do we do, Sarah?" she asked, voice trembling but determined. Sarah gripped her hand, eyes blazing. "We have to act fast and decisively. I'll publish the exposé as soon as possible. But first, you need to be safe. Brace yourselves. Once the story goes live, Eaton won't let us be." Meanwhile, in his Regal Hotel office, Eaton sipped a stiff drink, his hands trembling with rage and fear. He knew that if those historical revelations went public, everything he'd built would vanish. He snatched up the phone, voice icy and brutal. "Take them out. Now. No excuses. I want both of them neutralized before this spirals further." He hung up, his eyes full of hatred as he stared out at Manhattan's nighttime skyline, showing no mercy. In the small safe house in Harlem, James squeezed Tiana's hand, his gaze steady and resolute. "We cannot back down. Justice lies ahead, and now we fight not only for my family but for everyone hurt by Eaton's injustice." Tiana nodded, her heart brimming with strength and unshakable faith. She knew the final battle had begun, and this time they would not fail. The sun rose slowly over New York City that morning, but never had its light felt so weighty or meaningful. Tiana awoke in the little Harlem room just as her phone began buzzing insistently on the bedside table. On the other end was Sarah Winters's excited voice, burning with urgency. "Tiana, the story is on the front page. The truth is finally out." In an instant, Tiana's sleep evaporated. She bolted upright and powered on her laptop. There, emblazoned across the New York Tribune's homepage in bold, commanding type, was the headline, "Regal Hotel's 70-year cover-up exposed, historic land fraud revealed." Sarah's powerful article laid bare the scheme to steal May Lean's land, complete with documentary evidence, photographs, and George Eaton's own confession. It even detailed how Eaton continued to conceal the truth, threatening witnesses to keep them silent. Within hours, the exposé had spread across media outlets and social networks. Everywhere, people were talking, outraged. Hashtags like #Justice for James Lee, Truth at Regal, and Stop Eaton surged to the top of trending lists. Back at the Regal Hotel, tension crackled through every hallway. The board of directors called an emergency meeting. Richard Wells, the usually neutral board chair, spoke with firm resolve. "I'm ordering an immediate internal investigation. Mr. Eaton, we need a full explanation from you." Pale and forced into composure, Eaton rose slowly from his seat at the head of the table. His voice was cold and defensive. "All of this is fabrication, a plot to destroy the reputation of the Regal Hotel, and of me personally. I won't let these people dismantle everything my family has built." But his denials rang hollow. Outside the hotel, a massive crowd had gathered, chanting for justice. Their voices boomed through megaphones. "Justice for James Lee. We won't stay silent on stolen history. Eaton must resign." The board could no longer ignore the pressure. Major news outlets joined in, condemning Eaton's irresponsibility and demanding full transparency from the Regal. Chinatown leaders and social activists rallied, amplifying the public outcry. In his private office, Eaton fumed, slamming his fist on his desk. Desperate, he called for any means necessary to stop James and Tiana. "I don't care how. You must make those two disappear. Silence them once and for all." But the more fiercely Eaton fought back, the more his cruelty and desperation were laid bare. Threatening messages began arriving on James's and Tiana's phones, anonymous calls hinting that their lives were in grave danger. In the safe Harlem home, James squeezed Tiana's hand, worry and determination warring in his eyes. "Tiana, now is the crucial moment. We cannot let fear dim our resolve. The truth is out, and justice is on our side." Tiana met his gaze, her spirit bolstered by his steadiness. "You're right, James. We can't give up now, especially not when the whole world is watching. Eaton's desperation makes him more dangerous than ever." As they planned their next move, the doorbell rang. Both startled, they braced themselves. When Tiana peered through, she breathed a sigh of relief. It was Amanda Chun and Sarah Winters. The two strode in, faces set with unwavering resolve. "Tiana, James, we're here to protect you," Amanda declared, stern but warm. "The community stands with you. Eaton won't dare move against you now." Sarah nodded in agreement. "The media and public pressure are immense. It's time for you to go public yourselves. Eaton only has power while we stay silent. Let's show him we won't be bullied or lied to." Tiana and James exchanged resolute looks. They knew there was no turning back. They agreed to hold a press conference right in front of the Regal Hotel, speaking the full truth, not just to defend themselves, but to ensure justice would truly prevail. Inside the Regal, Eaton scrambled for ways to avert the impending disaster. But no matter how fiercely he fought, he recognized with bitter clarity that his world was crumbling under the force of truth and the courage of those he'd underestimated. The final stage of the battle had begun, this time with the media, the community, and the unassailable power of truth squarely on Tiana's and James's side. And Eaton would not escape the reckoning he so richly deserved. That morning, the New York sky was shrouded in a tense mist, heralding an unavoidable showdown. Outside the Regal Hotel, the protest crowd still thronged with signs and chants. But inside the grand conference room, the atmosphere was even more charged. James and Tiana entered side by side, their eyes alight with an unprecedented resolve. This was the decisive moment they had been waiting for. A direct confrontation with the most powerful figures at the Regal Hotel, who would at last have to hear the truth buried for decades. Seated around the massive walnut conference table, the entire hotel board wore grave, anxious expressions. Richard Wells, the board chair, opened the meeting in a calm but cautious tone. "Mr. James Lee, Miss Tiana Jackson, we have heard very serious allegations, and today you will present the evidence you have gathered." James rose, his gaze unwavering and voice steady yet compelling. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am not here seeking pity or sympathy. I am here seeking justice for my grandmother, May Lynn, who was ruthlessly defrauded by Mr. Eaton's ancestors, robbed of her property and my family's honor. This is no longer a private matter, it is a historical truth that must be revealed." At that moment, the conference room door burst open. Eaton stormed in, furious and agitated, his voice booming. "This is baseless slander. You cannot believe these fabrications. I have worked tirelessly for the good of the Regal Hotel for years." Before Eaton could continue, James met his glare with calm firmness. "Mr. Eaton, I'm sorry to say you can no longer escape the truth. We have clear evidence of your family's wrongdoing." Tiana stood and placed her laptop on the table. On the large screen, images, documents, and historical records flickered into view, irrefutable proof of the Eaton family's fraud against May Lynn. Eaton's face went ashen, but he desperately denied it. "These are all forgeries. You seek to destroy me with lies." Just then, the door opened again. Kevin Peterson and Heather, former Regal employees, stepped in. Kevin advanced, courage in his eyes, holding out a USB drive. "I recovered the security footage Mr. Eaton ordered deleted. I saw him and those intruders break into Mr. Lee's suite to steal the crucial evidence." Heather followed, her voice trembling but resolute. "I admit Eaton coerced me into spying and stealing documents, but once I learned the truth, I could no longer stay silent." The conference room crackled with tension as each new piece of evidence was laid bare. Eaton's attempts at excuses fell into weak, helpless shouts. At that moment, Grace Wong, a dignified older woman with a kindly strength, entered. Every board member stared in surprise. Stepping forward, Grace spoke with powerful clarity. "I am Grace Wong, now 85 years old. I am here to testify that I once knew May Lynn, James Lee's grandmother. As a child, May Lynn helped my family when we faced discrimination. I remember the day she was forced to leave here under the Eaton family's oppression. I have waited a long time for this day to tell the truth." Her words struck the room into absolute silence. Eaton nearly crumpled, unable to find any rebuttal to such living testimony and overwhelming proof. Richard Wells fixed Eaton with a stern gaze. Mr. Eaton, we have heard enough. With all this evidence and testimony, we have no choice but to terminate your management contract immediately." Eaton stood frozen, eyes blazing with despair and rage, utterly powerless before the irrefutable truth. Wells then turned to James and Tiana with evident respect. "Mr. Lee, on behalf of the Regal Hotel Board, I sincerely apologize for the suffering your family endured. We will formally recognize your legal ownership of the Regal and ensure these historical injustices are righted." In that moment, James felt the greatest burden of his life lift. He turned to Tiana, gratitude and admiration shining in his eyes. She offered a gentle, tear-streaked smile, moved by the profound significance of the moment. Eaton sank into his chair, head bowed, his defeat bitterly written across his face. For the first time, he faced the consequences of his own and his ancestors' wrongdoing. Outside, the protest crowd erupted in cheers as news of James and Tiana's victory spread. They knew justice had prevailed, and history's truth had finally been restored. James squeezed Tiana's hand, his voice soft but powerful. "We did it, Tiana. Justice has come home." Tiana nodded, hope bright in her eyes, ready to embrace a new future. One no longer overshadowed by injustice, but forever protected by truth and fairness. Immediately after the conference room doors closed behind Eaton, a fresh breeze swept through, gentle yet invigorating, as if it had carried away all the stifling gloom of the past. James stood center room, surveying the board members with pride and unwavering resolve. From this moment on, the Regal Hotel will be more than just a luxury property. It will stand as a symbol of truth, justice, and cultural reconciliation. We will rewrite this venue's history in a manner both worthy and complete. The board members nodded in agreement, all recognizing that a new chapter had officially begun. James was quickly confirmed as a major shareholder, owning 25% of the Regal's stock, making him one of the most powerful voices in every decision. Wielding his new influence and responsibilities, he launched sweeping reforms to transform the hotel into an emblem of cultural diversity and a firm stand against all forms of discrimination. One of his first decisions was to appoint Tiana as Director of Culture, an unexpected move for many inside the hotel and in the community, but it soon became clear that no one was better suited. Her multicultural background, linguistic talents, and demonstrated courage during their battle had proven her the ideal choice. In her new role, Tiana immediately set about creating a comprehensive history and anti-bias education program. She assembled a team of experts and advisors, including Amanda Chun from the Chinatown Historical Society and journalist Sarah Winters. Together, they developed interactive courses and exhibits, teaching staff and visitors alike the values of fairness, respect, and unity. The Regal began to evolve dramatically. The once quiet tea lounge was reborn as the Phoenix Room, a vibrant cultural hub hosting art exhibitions, musical performances, and cross-cultural events. A prominent tribute to May Lin graced the center of the room with a detailed historical plaque, helping guests appreciate the story once buried by greed and selfishness. One sunny morning, Heather, the staffer who had formerly obstructed and opposed Tiana, stepped into Tiana's office, looking uneasy. Tiana looked up, surprised to see Heather there, eyes full of remorse. "Tiana," Heather began, her voice trembling, "I know I did many wrong things before, and I don't expect an easy forgiveness. But after everything that happened, I want you to know I've changed. I want to contribute to the educational program you're building." Tiana regarded Heather for a moment, sensing the genuine sincerity in her words and eyes. She rose, stepped forward, and gently placed a hand on Heather's shoulder. "I'm glad to hear that, Heather. Everyone makes mistakes, but not everyone has the courage to acknowledge and correct them. We can always start anew. From that moment on, Heather became one of Tiana's most enthusiastic allies. Heather's transformation stood as powerful proof that, even when shrouded in darkness, people can still find the light of forgiveness and kindness. As for Eaton, after his dismissal he all but vanished from the public eye. Those who once knew him now only caught rumors of his solitary life, steeped in regret and rage. But James and Tiana no longer concerned themselves with that. They understood that building a fair, hopeful future mattered far more. In the weeks that followed, the Regal continued its remarkable metamorphosis under James's leadership and Tiana's innovative cultural stewardship. Major newspapers ran inspirational headlines like "The Regal Hotel, where history is restored and cultures unite," and "From symbol of division to model of multicultural harmony." Visitor numbers surged, and the local community's skepticism gave way to admiration. The Regal was no longer famous just for its elegance or service. It had become renowned for its profound historical significance. One day, as James and Tiana prepared to launch a new multi-ethnic cultural program, a group of students from various New York schools visited the history exhibit. Their curious, wide-eyed faces lit up as they listened to the stories of Mei Lin, of James, and of Tiana herself. In that moment, Tiana grasped the deepest meaning of her work. "We're not just changing the past," Tiana said to James, her eyes glistening with emotion. "We're helping build a better future for these children." James smiled, taking in the hopeful scene around him, his heart light and full of joy. "That is the greatest success of all, Tiana." Outside, beneath clear blue skies and bright sunlight, guests and locals alike queued up to visit the Regal, eager to learn the remarkable story behind this place. A story of courage, perseverance, and the extraordinary power of truth and justice. And in the hearts of everyone, James, Tiana, Heather, and the once wounded staff, the greatest lesson shone through. That after all they had endured, the most precious outcome was their capacity to forgive, to heal, and to rise from the darkness into the light of unity and compassion. The grand opening ceremony of the Phoenix Wing at the Regal Hotel was a solemn affair, marking a complete rebirth. A powerful declaration of truth and reconciliation after so many dark days. Warm light from the elegant golden lamps bathed each restored wall, and every intricate carving, painstakingly revived by skilled artisans, shone with pride. Guests poured in from all corners, community leaders, journalists, and everyday citizens who had once marched in the streets demanding justice. Their presence testified that Mrs. Mei Lin's story, and the Lee family struggle to reclaim their honor, had become a symbol for the entire community, living proof of the power of unity and courage. James stood at the podium, his gaze warm, his expression more at ease than anyone had ever seen. His voice rang out, gentle yet strong. "Today, we're not simply reopening a long-forgotten wing of the Regal Hotel. We're resurrecting an important chapter of our history, a story of truth and bravery that was almost lost forever." He turned to look at Tiana, his eyes shining with deep gratitude. Tiana stood beside him, her heart swelling as hundreds of eyes fixed on her. James's voice grew more emotional. "I want to take this moment to express special thanks to one person, the one who restored my faith in truth, in justice, and above all in myself. Tiana Jackson, without you, today would never have happened." Thunderous applause erupted. The audience rose in enthusiastic acclaim. In that moving instant, James drew a small velvet box from his coat pocket and opened it, revealing the exquisite jade phoenix pendant, his family's priceless heirloom. The phoenix wing isn't just the symbol of my family. It represents rebirth and renewal. Today, I want to pass it on to the one who helped me resurrect everything this pendant stands for. Tiana, you deserve to have it. Tiana gasped, tears welling in her eyes, as James gently placed the pendant around her neck. In that sacred moment, time seemed to stand still, bearing witness to a bond deeper than blood, a message of forgiveness, healing, and family. "James, I don't know what to say," Tiana choked out. "This pendant is your family's greatest legacy. How can I—" James smiled and took her hand. "You are already family, Tiana. Truth is our greatest treasure, and you've guarded it for me. This isn't just a gift, it's a responsibility and the absolute trust I place in you." As applause thundered on, Heather watched from a distance, deeply moved. No longer the doubter and adversary, she had become part of this journey of restoration and transformation. She stepped forward to Tiana's side and whispered, "Tiana, thank you for offering me a second chance. I promise to stand by you always and protect the values we've rebuilt." Tiana hugged Heather, sensing that the most genuine change always springs from the hearts of those who've admitted their mistakes and learned from them. Outside the Regal Hotel, amid the celebration and hope, a black SUV idled across the street. Its window rolled down to reveal Michael Phillips, grandson of Warren Phillips, former conspirator to the Eatons. Michael watched the ceremony with an unreadable, icy expression, like a predator studying its prey. He tapped his phone call. "We underestimated them. This won't end at the Regal. We need to prepare more carefully. I won't lose anything again." His gaze stayed locked on Tiana and James, as if trying to pierce them from afar. Then the SUV melted back into Manhattan's traffic and crowd. Back inside the hotel, everyone lifted their glasses in celebration, unaware that the fight for truth and justice, despite its great victory, was far from over. Tiana felt a flicker of unease, glanced toward the window, but the black SUV had vanished. Clutching the phoenix pendant at her heart, she whispered, "James, I feel like this story isn't over yet." James gave her a reassuring, confident smile, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Don't worry, Tiana. Whatever comes next, we will overcome. We've won once, and if we must, we'll be even stronger next time." Tiana managed a relieved smile, brushing aside the momentary fear. Yet, deep inside, she knew that, like the phoenix she now wore around her neck, this journey is always a cycle of trials, an unending struggle to protect what's most precious. The Regal's soft lights continued to glow, but out there, somewhere in the shadows, darkness awaited, ready once more to test the courage and strength of those who dared to stand for truth and justice. The story of the Regal Hotel isn't just about uncovering the truth. It's a testament that bravery and justice will prevail, no matter how many challenges lie ahead.